course, recuse again from this.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I'm going to call to order the April 9th, 2026 Lexington Planning Commission, and we'll start out with the approval of the agenda. Do we have anybody need to change anything or concerns? And if not, I'll take a motion in a second.
Motion to approve?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Okay, next is approval of the minutes. Anybody have anything they need to point out about the minutes? They look very comprehensive to me. Then I'll take a motion in a second on that.
Move approval of the minutes from March 26th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, and motion carries unanimously. All right, next up is citizens' comments on matters that are not on the agenda. If there's anybody who would like to say anything about anything that's not already on here, come on up. And seeing as nobody is coming up, I'm going to close that up and we'll move on to new business. And the first item is entrance quarter COA 2026-03, an application by Drew Kepley of Washington University for certificate of appropriateness for construction of Founders Hall at 204 West Washington Street on a portion of the 2.39 acre parcel tax map 16-1-1. First, I believe we might have a recusal.
Yes, that's right. I've already recused from this matter by virtue of my employment at WNL. So I'm not going to read the disclosure statement again, but it's already in the record and I'm going to step down off the dais.
Right.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. All right. So Arnie, do you have a staff report?
Indeed. Good evening, everyone. As you know, this is the third rendition of this or edition. And during your last meeting on the 26th, you approved a night sky compliant bollard and also approved all the landscaping that was proposed with the exception of the tree line plantings along Lee Avenue. You asked for 2 revised elevations, both at the 5-foot high sort of perspective, showing the optional tree plantings in an effort to reduce the effective visual mass of Founders Hall. We mistakenly gave the applicant the wrong date because we weren't going to be in the office last Friday. So they provided those revised drawings on Tuesday when we forwarded those to you. And we also provided you hard copies. So you should have those in front of you. You'll notice on the plan view, at least 2 additional trees on the Lee Avenue side and same in the perspectives for the elevations. That's all I have for comments. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions for Arnie? Okay. Do we have an applicant statement? You'll state your name and address.
Good evening, Tom. Good evening, Tom Kolaski, Executive Director of Facilities at Washington Lee University. Based on the comments that we received at the March 26th meeting, we went back and worked with our landscape architects to amend the plan. Additionally, we invited a local Lexington-based landscape architect, Arthur Bartenstein, to a work session to provide a peer review of the amended plan. So the landscape plan presented here this evening is the collective work of several landscape architects, and in their professional opinion, it's sufficient to reduce the visual mass of the building.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that you have taken this to heart and approached it in that way. So I very much appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Kolaski? Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Public comment. Do we have any public comment on this issue? If so, you're welcome to come up to the stand. Okay, I'm going to close public comment and we'll move on to commission discussion. So any thoughts on these new drawings and the new plan?
like you, I appreciate the manner in which the applicant has taken this, our request, and I appreciate the revised plans.
Krista or Mary Stewart, any?
I agree. I think it makes a huge difference. And the horn beams are appropriate for the city, and I think they will fit that space beautifully. So.
Looks nice. Well, sounds like we are all in agreement. Shall we move along to a motion and a second?
Before we take a motion, just sort of for the record, and I know that the site plans are at the discretion of the planning director and staff. I feel in some ways this was it would have been nice to have more people in discussion on this. And I really, I know there's no way we can urge them, but I feel as though both Jonathan and Leslie would have been really helpful to have part of the discussion on this. So I hope it turns out as pretty as we would like, and not be canyon-like, which I came across in some comments earlier. That would be my hope.
I think we all share that hope that it will not feel like like you're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon of a sort of a at a little bit of a smaller scale. Any other comments? I mean, the folks who recused themselves felt that they needed to do that. So, well, then I will entertain a motion and a second then. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. Do we have language for a motion?
Do right before that history of the application
Oh,
that
yeah.
I just read.
Page 10.
I move to approve the landscaping and design elements as proposed of this entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness application ECCOA 2026-03 for the construction of the new Founders Hall at the southwest corner of Washington Street and Lee Avenue as proposed by the applicant.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all again. We very much appreciate your working with us on this one. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, PUD zoning text amendment. Arnie, do we have a staff report?
We do.
Actually, maybe we'll wait for
Wait for just a moment.
John to come back up.
Our next task, as far as zoning text amendments, happens to be taking a look again at planned developments, planned unit developments. Those are sort of our pressure release valves. It's the one zoning district that gives us some flexibility. What we're really tasked with is just looking at the residential portion. So we are hopeful, because also further explanation, we are now at the point of
Arnie,
infill development is really what is the last thing that we're trying to accomplish. Most of our, if this is not quiet enough, I was too quiet. There's also some adjustment on there, Brinsley, if you wanted to play with it. Because we're dealing with infill for the most part, we probably need more flexibility now than we did at the beginning of the development pattern for the city. So what I'm asking you to do is basically pretend like you've been invited to an event, and you need to figure out whether or not you need to go and try on your old dress or your old suit, make amendments to it, or just go out and buy a new outfit. This is actually the old suit or the old dress. This was in place in the zoning ordinance prior to the major overhaul in 2017. So this is the mechanism that we had since 1990 to allow some flexibility in our residential zoning districts. So what I'm proposing to do is just to go through this, not line by line, except for the intent and purpose section. I will go line by line
Yeah.
there. And then see, I'm hoping to get a sense out of you whether or not this suit, as old as it may be,
Mm.
fits,
Mhm.
if it may fit with some modifications, which is likely, or do we need to do a wholesale review of other, as we had done with cottage housing and mini warehouse and cobble together, compose something new from other jurisdictions, just as an example.
Mhm.
I'm hopeful that what we have here can be used in some fashion, but I'll leave that up for your recommendation.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Arnie before I open it up for public comment? Okay, if anybody in our audience would like to come up and make a public comment about this particular issue, planned unit developments in Lexington, come on up. All right. Oh, come on up. Just state your name and an address.
Hi, my name's Natalie Egger. I'm from Chicago, but I go to school here. And on sort of these amendments, I just wanted to add that there does seem to be an enormous amount of space sort of in the Newtown area. I was looking at that just on Google Maps, and it's a lot of land. And while I wouldn't discourage, like obviously everywhere can use infill development from the tops of like buildings downtown, I also feel like it could be cool in the future to see some of that land be maybe more efficiently used. And maybe less of an emphasis on like lawns as an amenity, but just wanted to mention that.
And sorry, you said Newtown. Do you mean the R, what is it, R2? You mean like Providence Hill? That sort of area?
Exactly. Yeah, where you've got sort of like the traditional downtown, but then it's sort of expanded in this area.
Yeah.
And it's enormous, and it really is all suburban homes that are very big. And so I feel like to have a little bit more flexibility with that could be pretty helpful moving forward.
Great.
Great.
Thank you so much. All righty. Well, moving on then, I'm going to close public comment and we'll move on to commission discussion. So how would you like to proceed with this?
I'd like to read the intent and purpose section and then just go through the other sections, not line by line, as I intend to do for the intent and purpose section, and then just sort of give you an overview of that, and please questions at any time. And then at the end of this, may ask that how would you like to move forward? Keep this as is, keep it with some modifications. And this is just the first read through. So you can also sleep on it till the next meeting and then figure out how we want to move forward.
Okay.
The font is bizarre.
I'm sorry, what
The
is?
font. It's like confusing to read. It feels like something's wrong with my brain when I get to certain words like flexibility, and it's like, ooh. So
We'll make a note to change the font.
it's just like, I don't know what that font is, but I'm more curious because it's fascinating.
It's historic Lexington font. The entire ordinance was written this way, and whatever this font is.
Okay.
Somebody had a peculiar computer. All right.
So the intent and purpose, and again, this is planned unit developments. As we'll find out, it's for residential uses. And the intent and purpose is the planned unit development concept encourages and permits variation in residential developments. Its intent is to permit greater flexibility in order to allow more creative, innovative, imaginative, and where possible, environmentally sensitive development than may be possible if the underlying zoning district's regulations are strictly applied. So the keywords there, at least for me, are variation in developments and greater flexibility. And a PUD is intended to provide both for development flexibility of undersized lots and to allow the use of diversified development techniques for larger parcels. The PUD overlay is intended to expand housing opportunities for persons of all income levels.
Yeah.
A couple little technical things there. This is an overlay district where we would utilize whatever the underlying residential zoning district standards are, and then apply this on top of that and give variances or modifications to those underlying zoning district standards. As an example, if it was an R1 and the minimum lot size is 8,000 square feet, through this process where they show it to you as a unit of development and show it to you completely on a plan, you can approve less than the 8,000 square feet per single family home on and through the PUD process. Now, you may recall that we did with PDMU, we did not do the overlay, we just created a new district. A little bit benefits to one versus the other, but this is written as an overlay. It can stay that way, or we can just make it.
And is it currently overlaid over all residential districts?
It
Like,
doesn't exist currently, in the sense that it's no longer in the code, but the way it was written,
I see.
it is written for the residential districts, and we'll get to that in a second. And we need to make the distinction in my mind, whether or not RLC falls within that or not. Clearly, this would cover or be allowed to be placed on top of R1, R2, and RM.
Mhm.
But then we have to make sure that we distinguish whether or not it will also apply to residential light commercial, because that's that sort of hybrid that breaches residential and the commercial districts. So any questions there sort of on what the intent, a little bit more background perhaps? Are there R1, R2, RM residential districts? They're pretty standard. I mean, there's not flexibility allowed.
Yeah.
We know what the lot requirements are, what the density requirements are, height requirements, lot width. They have to be on a public street fronting. So when we have odd parcels, which you will on infill because all the easy ones have been developed for the most part, or you have an odd ownership history, and then you need to figure out what to do with that piece because of the only frontage for that larger piece of property is a little skinny piece up on the front main road. So that's sort of the intent, to provide that flexibility and also the variation in development that we don't have in the traditional residential zoning districts.
Okay, and may I ask a question really fast? So as of right now, there are the plan unit development is not part of our code.
Right. And I don't have a good history, unfortunately, in that when I first started in 2016, we were operating under this zoning ordinance with the plan unit development still included. And then when we made that wholesale change, very significant structural change to the zoning ordinance, this just fell by the wayside. And then we had that, and then a couple of years later, when we had the update to the comprehensive plan, we had that mandate to do something about the PDMUs, which we implemented. But the flexibility ended up being removed for some reason that I don't have a great explanation for. I vaguely recommend a couple of conversations around, well, we don't want the PD or the PUD to also allow commercial activities at the, like, as a neighborhood store. We just didn't want to integrate that level of commercial into a residential area. I don't have a great explanation as to why PUD as it existed previously just fell out. But we do not have this currently, but we had it up till 2017.
And how is this different from cottage housing?
It is a little bit different from cottage housing. There's more flexibility here. If you remember all the standards that we put into place in cottage housing, you know, for that specific type of development, that was it allowed flexibility from some of the standards, but also in a very sort of boxed in version. Now, we are going to have to figure out, if this is developed again, how do we treat cottage housing?
Right.
Do we protect it, or in some form or fashion, or do we just say, no, this is the new version of that and allows a lot more, and then nobody's actually going to go for cottage housing because they're just going to do this instead?
Wow, that seems like we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort and really worked so hard on cottage housing that it feels sort of strange that we would just say, okay, forget it. That's going to go away.
Still do a carve out, I think. In other words, you can still say, if it's going to be cottage house like, then it's got to be cottage housing
Mhm.
according to what we already have. And then all this other stuff leads to flexibility for the other types of housing developments.
Right.
So I think we should be able to have the ability to sort of carve out, and again, I'm going to call it a protection
Okay.
for cottage housing. So I don't know how else to say it.
And is yours, okay, so let's say we protect cottage housing. I mean, we spent all that time and effort on cottage housing because we were wanting to protect the character of these neighborhoods. I feel like we would still want to protect the character of these neighborhoods, particularly if we're, doing sort of non-residential uses of public or semi-public cultural or recreational character.
Whatever those may be.
Right,
Yeah.
whatever those may be. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. Given how broad that is, I'm not sure how you sort of protect the residential flavor of these communities and also allow something as, as broad as that set of.
Agree, and maybe it is worth adding to the intent section something that protects neighborhood character, just provide more description in the intent section to make sure that that is an element. Or also further on when we actually are in the sort of the criteria section for making decisions on these. But it's an odd thing, you're trying to allow a lot of flexibility, but you also don't want to have so much.
Yeah.
So how do you do that appropriately? The PUD is also the thing that they're going to show you a concept plan up front. And I keep saying it's old WYSIWYG software, which is really dating myself. But what you see is what you get. So what they propose and what you see is, and if that's the way you approve it, then so they have to do a lot more work up front on a plan unit development than they do on a regular rezoning or any other app or a conditional use permit, for example.
Just to make sure I understand on this concern, if we brought something like this back, if this commission or city council were concerned about an issue like neighborhood character, this wouldn't open the door to whatever anybody wants to do. It just basically signals, does it not, flexibility and potential. And so wouldn't they, with a PUD, have to bring a proposal before us? And wouldn't we then be able to address those kinds of questions on a
Right.
case-by-case basis?
Right. That's why the intent section is important. It's also a public hearing process, which I have not stated yet.
Mhm.
But somebody would have to apply, just like a rezoning or a conditional use permit. They have to submit an application with a lot more detail that I
Okay.
just mentioned,
Okay.
showing graphically, what this is supposed to look like. And then if it gets approved that way, then great. But there's also, we have to be careful in the criteria that we have further on. How are you going to grade these? What do you have? And how do you say yes or no? I think that would
Rate
be
or grade?
grade.
Grade them. Grade them. Okay.
So in that respect, it's like a CUP in that there's sort of criteria that you have that you'd have to justify your decision in relation to that finite set of criteria. And that gets built in at this stage.
Right. But those can be pretty hard. It can be pretty hard. We found that it's, if you have to say, oh, no, we don't like, this thing. And then it becomes a matter of very subjective interpretation. And yeah.
That's
I-
always going to be there. I mean,
Yeah.
to some degree, that is always going to be there. We can't write something with a fair amount of flexibility and not have those standards that are fairly open-ended.
Right.
So it's going to be up to how much do you want to rein it in? How much do you want to put down for those criteria? And how much do you just want to see what the project is? And then you make your decision or your recommendation based on how you interpret and how you can justify a decision based on the criteria that we have established. So it is going to be more subjective because these aren't the single family house on the R1 lot where we know the lot size, the lot width, the height and all that.
Right. But it's also not just residential.
Well, there's that one little part that we'll get to. It's mainly residential. or
Right,
primarily
mainly, but-
residential. I'm not even sure how to explain that part, but we'll get to it in a moment.
That's a good question. I'm a little bit confused on something that seems to be kind of primary to this. This would apply to those lots that are either too small for current standards current code, or are large but have quirky issues, like access. And is that right?
That is built into that purpose statement,
Mhm.
but it's also applicable to any property that is in the R1, in my interpretation, R1, R2, and RM zoning districts. And
Oh.
there's no, it's got to be smaller than X or it's got to be bigger than Y so it's,
If that's applicable to any lot in the R1 zoning, for example, then why make it an overlay, and why not just amend the zoning?
that's a good question. Are we comfortable enough knowing that most of the R1 lots, we'll just pick on R1 as an example, that they're mostly built out, and then however many ones that we have left, do we just want to say that's a by right thing with the more standards or not, and just let it be by right, and people don't have to come through and show you a plan for these when they
Eek.
meet the flexibility?
Eek. That's not really what it's the relaxation of development standards is a concern for the character of these neighborhoods. So I think we need to look as we move forward through these and take our swipes at it, that we consider those standards that we're really talking about relaxing. For example, under development standards, down farther on the same page, the first page, where it says relaxation following development standards, lot area, lot width, lot coverage, building type.
Mhm.
Building type is something that I think we need to look closely at. Building height, we need to look very closely at. Setback, yard requirement, street frontage, street width. Some of those are not as problematic for neighborhood character as others. And another question that I have is on the cottage housing, because I missed most of that hard work. And what parcels is that applicable to?
Oh, you're gonna test me. It's definitely a conditional use permit in several of the zoning districts. So people would have to come through the public hearing process, again, provide you with the plan, make sure that it meets those dozen or so standards that we had developed in there. So it's for residential. So is the question, where can
My understanding was
cottage housing
there were actually very few parcels within the city that were.
Yeah, was there a
could be-
minimum lot on that? I can't remember.
Yeah, I believe we did. So cottage housing is a conditional use in the R1, R2, RM, and RLC zoning districts. So it can be applied to all those. But I think your question is functionally, where do we actually have parcels where that's
There were parcel
possible.
requirements, which would make it very different from these standards. Thank
But
you.
if did that say the size of the lot? I'm just curious.
take a minute to find it.
I would appreciate that. I think that might be helpful.
Okay, cottage housing. So we had density, we have a table here, say R1 cottages, one cottage per 4,000 square feet. You had to have a minimum of 4 cottages, maximum of 12. Minimum lot size to accommodate at least the 4 cottages is 16,000 square feet.
10,000?
16.
16,000.
16,000. And how many, is that an acre? How much is that? Sorry.
43, but it's 16 into 43,
2 point something.
do something. It's
No, not
three.
quite 2, actually.
16 times
No,
2
2 point,
30.
Point
yeah,
something.
I was thinking
Yeah.
48. 2 point something.
So cottage housing only works on larger lots.
Which makes sense.
Anything else?
No,
On that one? Okay. Anything else on intent and purpose? So why are we doing this? Well, what are the pitfalls potentially?
Lots of thoughts, but no questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough. So applicable districts, the next one, the PD overlay may be authorized in all residential districts. I would like that to maybe have a parens and then say R1, R2, RM, and then whether or not you include RLC or not, just as an example, because sometimes we struggle with where does RLC fall? Does it fall
Yeah.
with the residential or does it fall with the commercial districts? So the permitted uses, any use that's permitted in the underlying district is allowed in the in any use permitted in the particular district in which the PUD is overlaid is allowed. So again, whatever's allowed in the underlying zoning district in R1, if it's a one family, if it's a two family, that would be allowed in the planned unit development as it's overlaid. Now, again, this is an overlay. We can make it an actual zoning district. Housing types authorized in any of the city's residential districts may be considered, but the project's density shall be no greater than that specified in the underlying district. So here we did have a stop where you would think flexibility for density would be one of the things that you would want, but we did not have that previously. So that might be another sort of pin or to put in and to think if we wanted to add some density. You could add in a factor of like 1.5 over what the base district is, just as an example, if you wanted to allow a little bit more. So there's ways to potentially handle that.
And would that have to be codified at this stage, or could we just drop the provision with respect to density and deal with that in the proposal process? Just a point of information.
I would not want to have somebody come in and
Yeah.
say, I want extra density, and we not somehow say that density is one of the things that you can get I'm going to use the word variance, but a modification or an adjustment
But with
for.
it, but it's important to have an upper bound on that?
Well, if we're not comfortable just saying nothing about an upper bound, just saying increased density.
Yeah.
And then
That's
to
what I
see
mean.
what we get.
Simple to say that. Yeah.
Sure. Because then you would just add it to the next section that Charlie already referenced or read from. So density is just another thing to consider. Do we not want to, or do we want to?
Thank you.
And then the next thing, I'm not really sure how to handle this next sentence. Non-residential uses of public or semi-public cultural or recreational character shall be permitted uses, provided such non-residential uses shall be compatible with and secondary to the primary residential use. I don't know what that's getting at. So you have a
Right.
primary residential
Yeah.
use and you're adding your own little museum. I don't know. And I don't have a good example from the
Mhm.
PUDs that we've already had approved. So that is something to keep an eye on.
Right, or maybe remove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have a friend who has a museum in her home
Yeah.
in Detroit.
Yeah.
So it's like, well,
So the point is, I guess, that if we don't know what it really means or how it's helpful, then maybe it's
Yeah.
not needed.
yeah.
It seems to be ambiguously permissive with respect to use, which
Yeah.
is not exactly the intent and purpose that you've described above, right?
I would agree, yeah. Then the next one, so we're allowed to relax development standards, but then they're very specific on which ones can be. And I think that's helpful because if somebody's coming in, what can I ask sort of for modification or variance or flexibility for, then it's for these items and these items specifically. And if you add density down into that, that's something to consider. Then open space, they have some open space provisions here for what is it? For a 2 contiguous acre parcel, you have to have at least 20% open space. And then they go on in detail to sort of how to define what that open space can and cannot have and how it can be calculated.
Just a moment, I'd like to go back to development standards.
Mhm.
This is something that we could, for example, building height or lot coverage, we could say a percentage of whatever is currently allowed. So maybe it's, building height. I think I feel like I'm in sort of sticker shock with this thing that we just were talking about earlier. So I would want to be careful about allowing a really tall building in particularly in the traditional neighborhoods as opposed to the suburban neighborhoods.
We can go-
just because of how tightly those houses are.
We can certainly go through the lot requirements table and see what the heights are in R1, R2 for the single family. And sometimes there's a little bit more if you have a wider lot kind of thing. And then figure out, do we need to say a height that you can have additional building height than maybe in parens, no more than 10 feet more than what's allowed in the underlying zoning district? There's some sort of mechanism to say yes, but you really can't ask for more than.
Right. Or maybe less than 10 feet, since that's an entire floor.
Yeah, I think we need to put a flag on building height.
Yeah.
Not decide that.
Yeah.
Right now.
But
Oh, yeah, we're not-
that, can apply to all of these, however we want to sort of lay this out again.
Okay. And there is some question about whether we're even wanting to do this, correct?
Well, it's on our to-do list.
Yeah.
And I think we need potentially the flexibility for the two glaring parcels that the city has. Spotswood and VDOT
Mhm.
could be something here that's applicable to those two parcels, but also just to sort of unlock the other parcels that we have to provide some more density with respect to the neighborhood, to unlock some of the parcels that remain vacant and that are for whatever reason difficult to currently build on.
Okay.
Arnie, would it be terribly onerous to get a GIS map pumped out that shows those lots that are within the residential districts that are unbuilt or underbuilt?
We have in the previous comp plan, we actually had a better vacant parcels map, and not by zoning, but just, I think all the parcels were coded in red for vacant parcels. And then you had to figure out, where they are and how many they were and what was beside it and whatnot. And in the current one, I think, if I remember correctly, it's not as great as the one that we had before. But yes, we can provide something, even if it's just a reference back to pulling the map out of the previous comprehensive plan
Yeah.
that shows the vacant parcels as they existed that 5-6 years ago.
So to that point, I was looking on the GIS map today and over on Borden Road, backing up to Nelson, if you can, anyway, before you turn to go toward 60 West, from what I could tell, there were there were some street addresses. I don't even know what they were, 508, blah, blah, blah. But then there were a couple that didn't have any address. And I thought, does that mean it's not developed? I didn't drive over there, but how does that translate, Arnie? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where there was no actual address?
Sometimes the GIS will have a 0
Yeah,
Borden Road.
Right.
Because it doesn't have a improvement on it, a house.
Empty lot.
Sounds like an easy filter.
So go
sorry?
check it out.
Maybe that's too easy to be
That's
real.
one of the examples, I think, is the rear yard of a PUD that you're talking about. But we'll get to that in a second. And I'm sorry, I can't.
You're
put
talking
the-
about the one on Stratford Lane, that one?
Well, no, the one that's actually across the street, but didn't get built as 5 units, but
Yeah,
Borden
that's the
Road,
one.
Borden 2009.
That's the one.
shoot, sorry, Charlie, I cannot find quickly the vacant properties map that we have in here.
I'll take a look. Thank you
Fortunately, if
for,
I recall, the one in the previous edition of the comp plan was actually better, but
I'll look into the previous version.
utilities and services and easements. For anything with 2 contiguous acres, there is a requirement for undergrounding of utilities as an example.
Why was major electrical eliminated or held out? Because it's so expensive?
Sorry,
The major electrical transmission lines are exempted from that? Is
if
it
it's like
because-
if it's a regional transmission line or something huge.
Oh, major,
I'm
I see.
thinking that's what that
So
means.
so residential electrical lines are undergrounded according to this?
Well, if it's a PUD and you're going to get flexibility for developing the way that you want, and you're at least 2 acres in size, I think the requirement as well, you're going to underground your utilities.
That's great.
So access and circulation, PUD provisions may not be utilized for projects where only existing public streets provide access.
What's up?
That confused me.
I had to sort of, as conjecture or I presume what that means is if you already have public streets and you have a lot or lots, then just go ahead and develop it according to the traditional pattern that's
Oh.
allowed in the R1, R2, or RM zoning districts. But if you're trying to unlock something and you have to provide either a new public street or a new private drive, then somehow this is better to go through the PUD process. But that's just a,
But we could drop that sentence, right?
Yeah,
And get
yeah.
greater flexibility, could we
Yeah.
not?
anything here can be amended. I'm just again trying to figure out if this suit is worth wearing again,
Right.
with tailoring or without.
Like, but that section could be revised, could it not, such that it
That
would
actually makes
govern
sense. Yeah.
if there's internal, yeah, if there's internal vehicular circulation systems, the conditions they'd meet, but not
Mhm.
say that, not, I mean, that first sentence seems really restrictive.
Mhm.
It seems to me like it could, if we dropped it, we'd get a lot more flexibility. Am I misreading that?
No, I think you're right. For one, where are we going to have lots that aren't already developed? They're on public streets. I just don't know what that's
Yeah.
protecting, what it's. And then it goes on to VDOT standards and everything and other things. And then sort of the last sentence, the PD's vehicular and pedestrian circulation systems must permit safe and convenient access to dwelling units. Sorry, the second to last one. Open space community facilities and other non-residentials. Adequate access and circulation for emergency and service vehicles shall also be provided. You may recall that our townhouse conversation, and even though the gentleman who was here but didn't stay long enough to make his comments, there were some comments that came in today for against townhouses for safety reasons and for emergency service vehicles in particular. So this still provides, even if somebody provides internal circulation system that is not a VDOT standard huge roadway, that they're still going to be reviewed by the fire department to make sure that adequate access is provided. So then management, because there's going to be some component of not just fee simple property where you're going to buy your particular townhouse lot. There's going to be some open space that is owned by everybody in that particular development. These are just some management standards that come along with that. Just the first one, they shall be, so all common open space properties and facilities shall be preserved for their intended purpose as expressed in the approved PUD. So we approve a PUD and there's open space here for the community to use. 5 years down the road, they can't decide, well, we're going to chop that up and sell half of it to that person and half of it to that owner. So it just has to stay intact. So a lot of this is sort of that type of protection and just sort of management of those open space areas. Any questions there? In administration, for new or so if you have a new one, or if you can do additions or alterations or modify construction, then you have to go back through the PUD process. That seems straightforward.
Yeah.
You get what you show, but if you amend that, the only way to amend that is to go back through the public hearing process. It's quite common for PUDs. And then again, I'm not sure it bears to go through the rest of that particular section in A, unless you have any questions. Legal documents. This is homeowners association. If anybody's ever lived in a homeowners association, that's this type of
Yeah.
stuff. It's,
Yeah.
we're just gonna make sure that the PUD as approved lives on, and then they're gonna end up doing all the maintenance and figuring out how they want to govern themselves.
Yeah.
So it's more just homeowners association type regulations.
Which is what we also did in cottage housing. We ended up saying that those would also be managed in the same way.
Right. Oh, I don't want to go. Oh, public notice. So in public notice, that's typical public notice sections that we already have. We can probably just easier say see section 15.2-2204 of the state code, because that's the code that says how we have to handle public hearings, advertising 2 weeks in advance, and that has also changed a couple times recently in the past 3 years.
Right.
So I'd rather have a reference there.
Good. Yeah.
Because otherwise, we get into some issues. And B2, so on the bottom of page 3 of 6, sort of the written notice, we do that anyway. We send out adjacent property owner notices for conditional use permits, for rezonings. And then 3 on the next page, that's the ugly yellow sign that we get to place in the front yard.
And is that also referenced in the state code?
No, I don't think posting is adjacent properties, and definitely the newspaper ad is, but I don't recall off the top of my head for postings. I think that's just something that how we have added it in.
Okay.
And then what you do after a duly advertised public hearing, this is very familiar to you for rezonings, conditional use permits. Now, objectives and application review, I think here's some important language, not that we have to go through it tonight, but this is how you would grade your application. If somebody comes in with a PUD, what standards do you have? So these are going to be important, maybe not to go through tonight, but for you all to really focus in on, so that you know when you can say yes and when you should say no.
Yeah.
Any questions about those specifically?
We're talking section D.
D, yes, sir.
D's and dog.
Yeah, I just would just point out again that flexibility could be at odds with the idea of development that harmonizes with existing properties.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a tough nut to untangle.
Where do you see that one? So
It's 6 is the harmonized part.
okay.
Yep.
Maybe we just need to work on some additional language there that still allows the
Yeah.
flexibility, but
In what way?
Right.
The harmonization is in what design aspects? And I'd put down materials, mass, and height.
Yep.
That's what I think would make for a harmonizing development.
Right. And maybe it's harmonized with the character.
Right. But what makes character?
Right.
And
But
It's
but if you
materials, mass. and
exactly. If
height.
you include both of those, so ensure that a development harmonizes with the character of existing adjacent properties, uses, and development patterns through materials, mass, and height.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
okay. So today we're gonna still figure out, does the suit, is it worth tailoring? And then maybe at the next meeting, we'll start tailoring, if that's how we want to move forward.
What would be the other option of making a new suit? Would we have to go through like what we did with cottage housing?
To
We would
make
be,
an option instead of making a new suit, or what is the option to make the new suit?
what would
Not
we do?
tailor-made.
Aren't they both the same?
How we would make a new suit is
Yeah.
how we've done it before, where we go and do some research and pull a number of different PUD codes that are residential specific from a number of jurisdictions, and we pull them apart and we stitch it back together
Right,
here,
right.
like we
Okay.
did with cottage housing as an
Right.
example. We pulled from 10 different codes, I think, in that.
Right. And it still might be interesting to see somebody else's PUD, even if we decide that this suit can be altered, we can take it to the tailor instead of throwing it out or giving it to whoever.
Borrow a sleeve from another.
Exactly. There might be a sleeve, or we might say, wow, we really like the way they tailored the collar
Yeah,
on that one. We'll
Sure.
go there.
Hell.
good point. The lapel, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And number 4 seems antithetical. So this is to encourage the clustering of single family dwellings for more efficient use of the land and the preservation of open space and significant natural features. They seem like they're going to fight with each other as well. It's hard to do both of those things. And
You know what I read that as though, Shannon? I read it as a common space, almost like in some of those cottage
Mhm.
developments, and less around the
Mm.
residential unit,
Mhm.
more land for a common space. Like there's a word for it and I can't think what it is.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying significant natural features and and maybe there are just not that many of those inside of the city limits that we would be talking about preserving as opposed to open space, which sure you can set aside and you can have the bigger yard so that you cluster things to the houses together, which is what we did in cottage housing as well, again. So yeah, I just wonder if it just seems like they're a little bit in conflict, but it's okay. I mean, I think we'll work through this. That's what I think.
I'd also point out that number 8 under that has the same issues that number 6 had for me. Coordination of architectural styles in what way?
Are we in discussion right now? Or are we in questions?
We're just
Both, anything,
sort of
Okay, good.
all is,
Good, just because I've got thoughts in relation to what people are saying, but I'm not sure if I'm within my rights to, yeah, okay,
I think we're
Okay.
just,
chatting.
yes,
Okay.
pretty
spitballing.
much.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely hear the points about 6 and 8. I think that the intention, if I'm reading it correctly, I can make this a question. Do you agree that the intention of these is actually to keep the kinds of priorities that I think you're asking about on screen, right? Such that if planning commission wanted to try to balance things, right, it would allow us to keep those on screen because you're saying,
Right.
am I making any sense at all? Like 6, so in other words, yeah, there's going to be sticky points there. I think you're right, but to me, I would almost be, I mean, I'd be comfortable dropping some of those myself, right? But I think what they're going to allow folks who are more concerned about preserving character to do is to list that as a priority that we can weigh alongside some of these other things. I'm not speaking in a clear way. Let me try to say it again, but I'll be brief. My view on all of this is that we need something like this. I think we need more flexibility because I think the city's all built out in as far as it can be under the current relatively inflexible standards. And that this is a real problem nationally, but also locally, because what it amounts to is a constraint on the supply of housing opportunities for people. So when you constrain that supply, it just drives the prices up. And it makes it really hard for people to afford to live in the city. And so then when people are trying to get access to schools and other amenities of life, so the way that we've set up the rules and the inflexibility in them is kind of keeping that opportunity out of the reach of a lot of people. So I'm definitely in favor of any tools like this that we could have to try to, in limited ways, build infill, find flexible ways. Look, there's a corner over here that something could be done with. Am I making sense?
Yes.
So I'm very much in favor of something along these lines, and I'm really confident that as a group, whether this is the suit or not, I mean, I think we could work, my thought is we can work with this suit. And I think y'all are noticing important things about, yeah, there's going to be points of tension here, and then we'd have to make decisions about, I don't think we're going to be able to like legislate the decisions, the judgment calls that would be made about the stuff that would come up, right? Like so the advantage of having a 6 or an 8 in there is just that it gets that consideration. It keeps it on screen as a legitimate thing to talk about if we're considering a proposal, right? Whereas if it drops away, then basically we're saying, well, whatever you think that effect on that outcome would be, we can't really consider it. Am I saying that? Is that correct?
I think so.
Able to have the guidelines in print for people to look at,
Yeah, I mean,
correct?
yeah, I'd be comfortable reducing some of those guidelines and getting greater flexibility myself.
I think, John, you're making great sense to
Thank
me.
you so much.
But what I was trying to
Yeah.
point out was that the idea of flexibility, design flexibility, and neighborhood character preservation
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
appear to an applicant
Yeah.
to be contradictory and
Yeah.
confusing.
Right.
So I was trying to suggest, what does it mean to say harmonize?
Totally.
In what way?
That's great. Yeah.
But I agree, we can we need this flexibility. I agree with that for sure. As I walk around the neighborhood and see these larger lots with these crazy large side yards, it's just, what is that for?
Yeah.
Well, I can see a nice little development there, but what I wouldn't want to see is a bunch of obelisk style structures.
Yeah.
That are 40 feet or 50 feet tall and have a base of 20 square feet.
I
Just
agree.
be bizarre.
I think we're on the same page. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I would say though that taking items like 6 and 8 out takes away some control, some level of control that the planning commission has. And the planning commission doesn't have a lot of control over something that comes in, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, and then you have this, prolonged interaction where, well, you didn't quite get it right. You didn't quite get it right again. And this really helps keep it very clear what the expectations are and what it could be judged upon. And so I think more guidance for the planning commission is quite helpful.
Yeah.
For us and for the applicants.
Mhm.
And, oh, yes, absolutely, for the applicant as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's going to be a ridiculous example, but number 8, for example, you would want something there and you would probably want to clarify it a little bit as has already been discussed, but you don't want to go so far to legislate to say architectural styles only to include X,
Yeah,
Y, and
sure,
I mean,
right.
that you don't
Right.
want to do that,
Right.
but you want to get to that sort of fine line of having enough guidance for the developer and also for you to say yes or no when that thing is proposed to you.
Mhm.
So maybe saying something, so this already says in relation to adjacent properties, but, through, again, maybe through its materials and
Yeah.
who knows, but you wouldn't want, in a neighborhood that has all clapboard houses, you wouldn't want somebody putting in a steel, your steel obelisk, right?
Yeah. Well,
So,
Is it basically, so like each one of these under D is a reason to say no,
yeah.
correct?
It's an point of consideration.
So like if one of 12 is not right, then we can say, no, you didn't meet this one.
If you in your review of that find that number 8, for example, it is not uniform with the architectural styles of the adjacent properties around it, and you feel strongly enough, that's your justification for voting no. Yes, you can vote no based on that one particular item.
I think you're right. The more of those we have, the less flexible it is, right? Yeah.
Right. I see what you're saying with, it's almost like systematically removing certain people from a certain place if they're not able to meet every single one of these things. And it's giving a lot of, I hear what you're saying about giving us power, but I don't know exactly why we are supposed to have that power.
well, we've been appointed by the city to try and ensure that the code of the city is implemented and to ensure sort of reasonable development. I believe that's my understanding of our role. And so our duty is to the citizens of Lexington to try and make sure that if they bought a house in a neighborhood, that they don't have the obelisk in the neighborhood, that would be inappropriate for the neighborhood. And if the buck stops here, I mean, the buck has to stop somewhere.
Mhm.
And this is a group of people who have been who have signed up to do this and have. So I mean, it's not, and I think power is probably not the right word. It's just, somebody who is in the role of being a parent. It's like, I really know that you want to have that bubble gum, like you want to have your house made of, I don't know, plastic bottles. I've seen those, right? you can't do that.
Mm.
That's not going to be architecturally, it not just not uniform, but that's not going to coordinate to have this house that's made out of plastic bottles that have been strung together. So is that power? No, I don't think so. I think that is trying to say, okay, we want reasonable development. We want development that is flexible, but maybe not as flexible as that.
Mhm.
I suspect we all agree actually about the fundamentals. I suspect, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth and please push back, but I bet we all agree that it would be good to get some additional flexibility so that we can
Yeah.
address these concerns that are articulated in the comprehensive plan. And I bet we also all agree that there should be some, that we don't want the obelisk, right? Like I bet
Or
we
a
all.
geodesic dome.
Right.
Geodesic dome.
Right. And so I think if I'm understanding correctly, what we're trying to discern right now is, do we think that we could go forward with a document like this and start a process over a couple meetings in which we try to figure out where's that balance and what's our view collectively about what that balance looks like?
Mhm.
And I really, apropos of that, I really liked, Shannon, what you said before about even if we think we can go forward with this suit, it was a suit, it was the metaphor, right? Yep. So it would be nice to look at some other designs as we think about what we might do with it at the Taylor. I think that would be great. Are there things that localities like ours who share those priorities have done in their version of this that we could look at as models and see, hey, we could add that? I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
How about for the next time? We'll discuss the next time, but we'll poll Charlottesville and Blacksburg. I always tend to reach out to them. They have planning schools. Their codes seem to be a little bit fresher, more up to date than some of the other ones. So we'll at a minimum pull those two.
That sounds great. Thank you.
So we're done with D.
Yes.
E is just after you make your recommendation, what council does with it. They either approve it and approve it with modifications or they deny it. And then if they do a conditional approval of the PUD, presumably they've changed something on the drawing and the approval. So the drawing needs to be modified to come back so everybody knows what the drawing that was approved actually is. That's how I read that. And then building permits in G, and then if modifications happen, sort of how is that handled? And then in H, what happens if the approved plan is not being followed, and what the zoning administrator can do? And then I is that if they do make changes, then it needs to be handled in the same manner as a new request, which means public hearing process. And there's some detail on the next page about that. And then a PD, like a lot of other districts, it will expire after a certain period of time if it's not being utilized. And then K, if the present or future owner does not follow the approved site plan, and then it should automatically revert back to that underlying zoning district. Because again, we're talking about an overlay. My only note here is after what period of time, it would be nice to have a time period there. So that's the end of the quick review. Does this seem like a suit worth tailoring with looking at a couple of other suits just for fun?
Certainly my sense is that that's the consensus
Yeah.
that we've been hearing.
That's good
So
because
far.
that saves a lot of time. You know, because it's not a 9 or 12 month process, then
Right.
potentially it's
Right.
it's a little
I
bit quicker.
think that would be better.
Arnie, is there a chance that there might be a smaller locality? Because, you know, Blacksburg's pretty
big.
big, Charlottesville's pretty big. How about another small one? I don't know.
Would Charlottesville, I mean,
Charlottesville's
sorry,
pretty big.
not Charlottesville, Stanton.
Well.
I don't know if they have,
Farmville. A small college town.
I'm not sure we want to follow the tiger approach, but that's okay.
I don't know what that approach is.
Sorry, there's a cut on Hampton Sydney, but
Oh,
So- so the other thing that threw together quickly, just to give you all a sense of what did this produce? So this PUD language that was adopted in 1990 specifically for 60 West, because that was the project that somebody was trying to promote or to trying to actually develop. So this is just a quick rundown, and sorry, it's probably could have been formatted better or laid out better. But I'm going to go through these quickly. If you even want to do that tonight, or if you want to save that, I'll give you that option.
I think it would be helpful if that's okay with you all. It's just a little bit after 6.
So I'm going to perhaps do reverse order, starting at the top and so chronologically. So Thompson's Knoll, the development that Threshold started, they used the PUD for variances or modifications to the lot size, to the front and rear yard setbacks. If you're familiar with that development, there are definitely smaller lots up there. That was supposed to be a mixed income community. And then I didn't say here and provide you what the underlying zoning district is, but I imagine that's R1 over on that hill.
Remind me where Thompson, is that the one behind Kroger? No.
That's further back behind Lilburn Downing.
Okay.
If you kind of sort of
Oh,
come
yeah,
in
yeah,
and then
yeah.
cut
Now
up
I know where
Evans
it is,
Street.
Right.
Okay.
And sorry to interrupt you. I'm wondering how effective these, how effective having these PUDs has been in bringing the prices down of housing.
That I'm not sure how.
It's
Because
just,
we talked about this a little bit with cottage housing, that we were going to limit it to a number of people or, and how do you ensure, to Chris's point, to John's point, how do you ensure that you have housing that stays affordable? You can build whatever, you can build with the intent to stay affordable, but how do you keep it affordable when it's in, let's say on Jackson Avenue?
That's a very difficult, if not impossible thing to do unless you do something like a community land trust or some other
Mhm.
mechanism that makes it affordable for a period of time.
And is the point to create affordable housing? Is that the point of the PUD? Is it just allowing people? I mean, because it sounded like you were concerned about affordable housing.
Mhm.
You
Yes.
expressed some concern. And so I'm just sort of like, we don't want to just increase density for the sake of, creating density.
I think it's true, but I think that it's also the case that, any expansion in the supply of housing should cause the price of some housing to decline.
You would think that, but talk to people in Boston.
I used to live there.
Yeah.
It's true. And the thing is that such systems are complex, so there's many inputs. So, like estimating the effect of a particular thing on housing prices is going to be hard. But I feel pretty confident with the general proposition that all else equal, expanding the supply of housing is going to cause prices to fall in general, right? It's just sort of supply demand stuff, right? That doesn't mean that I'm arguing against affordable housing, right? Indeed, I'm in favor of affordable housing, but I think any expansion in supply should be expected to address affordability to some extent, would be my thought.
I think that's all we can really get to in this particular land use type regulation. Without subsidies from state, federal, or specific programs, this isn't for affordable housing specifically.
Okay.
This is to unlock parcels that have not been developed before.
So I would like us to just keep that in mind in the discussions so that we're clear that that's not
The goal.
the goal.
Well, for me, it is among the goals if what we mean is, expanding housing accessibility and hoping that an effect of this would be to reduce prices. But I think you mean we're not making the building of designated affordable housing among the goals of this. Am I understanding? Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like that is not what the goal of the PUD is. It's opening flexibility as opposed to affordability.
Correct.
Do I have
I'm
that
going to read
correct?
the last sentence of the intent and purpose section again. The PD overlay is intended to expand housing opportunities for persons of all income levels. At a
So,
broad enough, it's not going to be specifically for affordable housing, and I'm using the affordable in the HUD term.
yeah.
Because that's
I think there's another way in which flexibility could impact prices beyond just expanding supply without there being housing that's specifically designated as affordable. In that one of the things that keeps prices elevated in certain areas are the very rules on minimum, like the fact that right? So if we get more flexibility about those rules, that means all that sort of the possibility that missing middle housing could be built, right, increases, right? Am I making sense?
Oh, yeah.
That's the thought anyway.
Knoll
Yeah.
is a good example of, not that we have a minimum house size anyway, square footage, but there are smaller lots, smaller houses in
Right.
Thompson's Knoll that fills a need for
Right.
people who do not want the 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 square foot house.
Right.
Does that mean that so price per square foot, they should be less and therefore more affordable, but not maybe reach an affordable level?
Yeah.
So that's what Thompson's Knoll, at least for the PUD, just reading through the PUDs really quickly, trying to figure out what it is that they received a modification for. And a lot of these are going to be similar. So Weatherburn, smaller lot sizes, reduced setbacks, and lots on a private street. The driveway that goes through not Thompson Knoll, through Weatherburn is private. It was always intended to be that way. We have learned a little bit, the fire department has, on sort of the width of the pavement, how the fire truck and the ladder truck with the outriggers, how much pavement they need, how people shouldn't be parking along there in case the outriggers ever have to go down. So there's a balance between life safety to allowing that vehicle or an ambulance to go through without on-street parking. There's also the balance between what we talked about last night at Strongtowns of having too wide of a roads and standards that are too big that can causes speeding and accidents on just because they're overly large size standards. Going on to the Borden Road now. Mary Stuart, this is the 510, 512, 514 Borden Road, where I'm going to read to you is from 2009, where they proposed 5 single family lots along Borden Road, where those 2 bigger buildings are now. So what was approved as a PUD wasn't actually built. So along Borden Road, and that parcel went all the way through to 60 or to West Nelson Street. And so the back part, for some reason, was thought that it needed to be saved and not built on. So this particular PUD carved up 5 narrow lots for single family houses and then left that part in the back as open space, not to be developed. So that gets to, what was it, number 4 about cluster housing and that type of thing? Because that was the intent. For some reason, it was important for them to save that piece on the back so you couldn't see the houses as you're going up and down Nelson or 60. And so but that was not what was built. Something else was built, and I don't know the history behind that particular part. So again, narrower lots for sure were approval for that particular PUD. Going on to 2006 in Lexington Commons, there was already that 1 6 or 7 unit condominium complex, and then they added another one at the end of the road. I don't know the history about the first one, but that second one in 2006 was to allow 6 unit condominium apartment building adjacent to the already existing Lexington townhomes on Lexington Avenue. And in particular, they reduced the rear yard setback from 40 to 25 feet. Another property, and one thing we had is the laptop. So if you wanted, we could go through Google Earth and or the GIS system and look at these next time if you wanted to
That
on the screen
would
to
be
get
helpful.
a visual of these.
That would be helpful.
So maybe we'll bring the laptop back next time.
Thank you.
Former city manager, Mr. Doan, perhaps, had a lot on 514 South Main. And it's behind another house, so he has a driveway, and his is an internal lot. But it was large enough to be subdivided. So that's what he was asking for, to create a new lot that would not have street frontage. It would only have frontage along the driveway that led to his house. As far as I can tell, that was never actually sold off or developed as a second.
So that's a
house anyway.
flagpole lot.
It was a horseshoe shaped lot. It had 2 one was a walkway around a house, and the other was a driveway to his house that's behind the house that actually sits on Main.
And they carved out both.
More recently, they got rid of the little walkway. So now it is a flag shaped lot, but then it had enough acreage area to be carved off and have another house built. But I'm not sure that it was ever actually subdivided. It doesn't seem to be a second house back there. So again, unlocking something that doesn't have frontage.
Right. And I'm sorry, do we generally not allow flagpole lots? Is that correct?
Well, that one existed somehow.
Right.
probably a lot of lots of records are lots that existed prior to the adoption of a zoning ordinance.
Mhm.
So somehow through
Right, I
development
just mean-
history, that one, there was a house behind the house.
And
That
do
was
we allow that now, though? Okay,
the point is that we require a parcel to have frontage on a public street.
is that mostly for fire access, for fire truck access?
I think it's for a number of things. I wouldn't say it's exclusive to fire
Okay.
access.
Okay, thank you.
The chocolate, on 2002, they had, this was to allow construction of a residence on a parcel behind, and these two, 121 and 123 are on Houston streets. I think that property already existed as a landlocked parcel, and this was the mechanism to allow construction on that. I do know that the fire department's not terribly keen on that one because it's a narrow driveway
Yeah,
and
it
driving
is.
a vehicle up there, and then how do you turn it around and that kind of thing. So there are additional sort of details to work out. The Richters on Overhill, if I remember correctly, as soon as you go on Overhill Drive, as soon as you go across the creek on the right-hand side, must have been a house a house, a cabin, and a garage on the one lot, and then an extra lot. And what they wanted to do is carve out the cabin and the garage on a lot, the house on a lot, and then create a third lot. So again, just not a lot, not very much frontage on the street, and they were trying to figure out how to use the existing driveway and the carve out another parcel that could be built upon while creating a lot for the house and then for the cabin separately. I believe that's the cabin that is now being expanded by another property owner.
Does the fire department tend to weigh in on decisions like this?
Let's say we adopted this flexibility again and it came through, I would want them to review it, but they would absolutely get a review. Oh, we would make sure that they got a review on the upfront for the PUD, yes.
Okay,
And the reason I say that and pulled it back is site plan review is required for all construction with the exception of 1-family and 2-family dwellings. And most of these are going to be that, I presume.
right,
would-
so we would want to make sure that that was in
That's a
here.
good point to somehow provide that ability for the fire to review.
Right, because if flag lots are one of these, then we definitely, we don't want the fire department to
All of a sudden,
be able to get to that house and then you have a conflagration of a neighborhood.
the caves off of Enfield, they had a larger internal parcel that they created and the house was built on that. So they are created a lot that does not have public street frontage. Donald Street, that kind of wraps around the cemetery, Evergreen Cemetery. There was a parcel off of a driveway, so they created the PUD for the construction of one house. And again, I think it's, now that I'm reading this, it's not terribly perhaps educational for you without seeing what it looks like, and we'll do that next time. Either provide the drawings or just actually fly around on the GIS and or on Google Earth.
Great.
Mary Sue, I think you mentioned the one off of Stratford Lane. This was a parcel with just a little bit of frontage. They allowed the construction of a house, a little duplex, and a home office / studio, all off of one little drive. And they ended up having a condition that, or deed restriction that prohibits subdivision. And that was interesting because more recently that property was on the market in the last year or two. And people were calling, hey, can I subdivide off the duplex from the rest? And I had to go back and do some research and was able to find quickly that no prospective buyer, you cannot subdivide that because that's how it was approved in the PUD. And there should be a deed restriction that goes along with that.
Right.
And then on Cincinnati Lane, interesting that Threshold had a parcel or purchased a parcel, somehow acquired a parcel, wanted to construct a duplex, but they wanted the duplex to be on its own parcel or each unit of the duplex to be on its own separate parcel.
Huh.
So that means the one that's on the backside, because it's turned sideways, it's not facing, it's turned. So
Okay.
the back duplex does not have street frontage on a public street.
They did that. Oh,
Right, did they do that?
wow.
Oh yeah, it's constructed.
Wow.
So there's a duplex as you're driving down Cincinnati and you see the side of it and the driveway, it leads you to the front of the other duplex or to the fronts of actually both of them. So it's just a duplex twisted or turned. And then 60 West, if you're familiar with that, they are 0 lot line duplexes on their own separate lots. And there they clearly got side yard setback variance because there's no setback where the two are attached.
Right.
And then they also had setbacks or 40-foot lot widths as opposed to 50. There were 0 lot lines as opposed to the 5-yard setback. And they had private interior roads with street widths that were less than what was required at that time. So what can we bring back? Maybe we provide sort of little snapshots of these, or we just do that on the computer at the next meeting. We can easily do that. Sounds like we would like 3 examples of other suits. I can provide those to you. You might have to read those. Those might not be terribly fun, but we can provide those to you. Anything else to sort of further this discussion?
Anybody want anything else? I think that'll be great. Thank you so much, Arnie.
Do that.
The undeveloped parcels map
Oh, yep.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
from from a previous
That's right,
comprehensive plan.
from the previous one,
Plan.
because that's the better one. Is that correct? And is that something that we can then put into the updated comp plan so that we have a current,
Well,
better?
when I say better, I think I'm talking about visually because the red parcels was either on a black background, they just sort of popped more.
Yeah.
So that's what my recollection is in the previous version. So maybe it's just a matter of the designer tweaking the way it's presented.
Maybe could you make sure that we can access both of those, the current one,
I'll make sure, I'll bring both of those.
That
or
would- that would be
provide
great.
both of those.
so that we can, and are you able to, on those, are we going to be able to see where they are? Like if there's one on Jackson, we'll be able to identify where on Jackson
It's
it is.
that,
It's got the map.
with parcels and then this parcel's red, so you'll know the city well enough and we're
Yeah.
small enough. You
Great.
have probably a pretty good idea of
Okay.
where that is. I don't
Just so
think,
long as it's got the streets on it.
I don't think it has all the streets, so you'll have to sort of surmise, okay, if I
Okay.
turn off of this street, like,
Okay.
you know what I mean? You're gonna have
I
to
do. Yeah,
figure your way a little bit through there.
that's okay. Thank you. All right, is anybody else, do we need any additional? Okay. Let's close this one out for today. And Arnie, do we have a zoning and planning report?
We do not, no report.
Okay, I know that Leslie's not here. Did she give anybody a city council report? Okay, no city council report. We are ready to adjourn. We just need a motion and a second.
Move to adjourn.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we're done for the day. Thank you all, everybody.
Thank you all.
For a second, I forgot if that was what I was supposed to say.
Can't leave.
It's been so long since I read Robert's Rules of Order.
Apologies if we're a little bit lax. If you're used to having a little bit more tightly run, okay.
I was kidding. Completely. I've never read Robert's Rules of Order.